Now, you may be quick to question, what is going on here? But this is actually an important interaction between a noble and king regarding the feudal system. The feudal pyramid was like a ranking chart of sorts, king or queen at the top, nobles below kings, knights below nobles, and peasants at the bottom. You would refer to someone with a higher ranking as a lord, and someone with a lower ranking would be referred to as a vassal. The feudal system worked like this. A king would give a noble a fief, and some peasants if they protected and worked the land. The noble would then hire knights with a smaller fief, and smaller portions of peasants to protect the land and make sure the peasants were working the land. A fief was a portion of land in an agreement. The knights would protect the land and the peasants would work the land. This is what held up civilization in the Middle Ages and was how things worked. The peasants were Roman slaves, the knights were the Roman military, the nobles were the wealthy upper-class men and were often friends with the king, who was just a tad more rich than the nobles. The Roman Catholic Church all began with someone called Constantine. They were a Rome emperor. Before one of his big battles, he saw a cloud in the sky shaped like a cross. At the time, people would have gotten killed for being Christian. But Constantine thought, if I win, then Christianity is real. After he won, churches and cathedrals were established throughout Rome and through the Middle Ages. The cathedrals were massive, as the smallest one had an area of 15,160 square meters. And the biggest one had an area of 21,095 square meters. Because they were so big, they took around 200 years to make.
I'd be dead by the time this finishes.
This is the Pope. The Pope was very powerful during the Middle Ages, because most people were Christian. As the Pope grew more powerful, he no longer had to pay taxes, and became the center of the Middle Ages. Because he didn't have to pay taxes, he became very rich. And because he was the center of everything, people trusted him. And when you have power and trust, most will start scams. He created indulgences, which were to get your loved ones to heaven faster, and could be used to be forgiven of sins. They were like multifunctional tickets. But this was really unfair because peasants were buying stuff to get their loved ones to heaven faster, with money they didn't have. But someone else noticed this and thought it was unfair. This is Martin Luther. He is a monk, which means he is a believer in God and has a Bible, which only monks and popes had, because the peasants didn't understand the language it was in and was why a pope would, and could interpret it for you. One day Martin Luther as a boy was caught alone in a thunderstorm. One of his biggest fears was his life getting cut short, as he thought he hadn't been good enough to go to heaven. So he prayed out to God, "God, if I survive, I will become a monk." After he became a monk, he noticed the scams and thought it was unfair. So he wrote a 95 thesis about things he didn't like in the church and would like to see change. This was very risky to do, since if you questioned the church, you would likely be killed. The church saw this, and because Martin was also a believer in God, the Pope gave him a chance to take back what he said. But Martin declined. They were brought to a court where the Pope was very mad, but Martin was right, there was no evidence from the Bible that supported indulgences. Out of desperation, the church labeled him a heretic. Do you remember earlier when I said monks had access to a Bible and you thought, then why hasn't anyone else confronted the church? This is why. Heretics were seen as crazy people and they were often put to death. Trying to escape, Martin fled to his friend's castle to hide. There, he translated the entire Bible, New Testament, from Hebrew and Greek, to German, so everyone could read the Bible. When the people found out, they were very angry and they started making their own types of churches called Reformation churches.